So, welcome to the Day Friday. My name is Michael Olschimke. I'm the CEO of Scalefree. We run this session here every Friday, 11 o'clock Central European Standard Time, to allow you, the audience, to ask questions about Data Vault, data-driven applications, data mining, distributed systems, cloud computing in this realm, essentially. All the questions are allowed. You can use the chat here to raise a live question if you want. You can use the Q&A function in the client. You can also just raise your hand, I give you a voice. Don't misuse that, right? And I will show you a link to a form where you can also upload your question, maybe upload some whiteboard pictures or small models, that kind of stuff. And then that would allow me to prepare some very simple slides for today's session, for the next session, essentially. If you receive multiple questions, I would cherry pick, and good questions, 10 minutes for a good short video, essentially. And if there would be no questions at all, I will talk about a cluster. I haven't done anything because I'm quite busy lately. So yeah, it's good that you're asking questions, actually. So let's check out the current question. Let me just show you the screen. So this is about handling JSON data in Data Vault satellites on Snowflake. And I would like to generalize this a bit, but that's the idea. So let me just read this. We have lots of data coming as JSON. Sometimes it is not feasible to extract each field into individual columns in the raw Data Vault. So we have taken an approach of storing the JSON as it is in the satellite, and we are using the business vault to extract the data as per the requirements. Is this a sound approach? We're using Snowflake database. So honestly, we do this all the time these days, that we have a satellite, but also sometimes a non-hysteresis link, for example, where we store the JSON as it comes. Well, when do we use JSON and when would we extract the data into relational attributes? First of all, when we receive JSON, for those attributes where you know you need those attributes, it's clear you need them. We typically extract them into relational attributes on most databases because they are stored more efficiently, essentially. Okay, you have a delay. Okay, sorry. Okay, I just see a comment here on the chat. So what you do is you have the so we extract the attributes that we need per requirement, essentially, right? So all the requirements we need from a JSON we extract. That's the basic idea. And then what we do is for those attributes where we know we don't need them at the moment, and it's not foreseeable that we need them, we just keep the structures. We don't analyze the structures in full. We just store the structures as JSON, essentially. All these substructures from Stripe or whatever, where we know we have no cancellation and so on. We just dump them as JSON into the satellite. So we do a mix, actually, in many cases. We do analyze those attributes which are important for us because of security and privacy requirements, essentially, right? We have to classify them and perform a satellite split, essentially. But for the other attributes, we just keep them as they are, essentially. Well, you could argue, what about security and privacy splits here? Well, in the worst case, you put them into their own satellite with the highest security classification and delete the data, classify them as personal data, essentially, in the worst case, right? So you go for the worst case scenario. So that's one. So we typically have a mix. If you have truly semi-structured data, where you have no clear structure in a JSON, for example, or every JSON document is different or slightly different, you don't have a structure you can extract, essentially, you could just dump the data as a JSON into the satellite or the non-hysteresis link. And we do this especially in real-time scenarios where we get JSON records in a different JSONs for different types of messages, essentially. So we just dump them, actually. And then it depends on your capabilities of your database, but Snowflake, but also Postgres derivatives, for example, they're good at dealing with JSON data. And what I would challenge is, why do you extract the data in the business vault? And then just assume that you store the results to extract the data in the business vault satellite. I would challenge this. Why don't you just virtualize everything? Because in Snowflake and Postgres derivatives, access to the JSON data is so fast, you don't need to extract and store the data, the extracted data, in some business vault satellites. We're only storing the extracted, the results from the business logic based on the extracted data. Those results we store in the materialized satellite if we need to. But in many cases, we just use the JSON syntax to get the attributes from the JSON document in the underlying satellite, do our calculations, and present the results as a virtual view. That's how, as fast as it is in Snowflake and other systems. So yeah, I would just keep it as is and just use it, and that's it. That's what works. But what you see is that when you have something like the semi-structured raw data vault, because that's what it is, you still have happening satellites, but lots of semi-structured data inside your structures. What you see is that there is a structuring process happening layer by layer, right? So you receive these semi-structured JSONs first. That's what you store. But then just because you're applying business logic, just because you're extracting the data you need for information marks, you're starting to structure your semi-structured data essentially, right? And then in the end, you get a structured star schema with dimensions and facts. Everything is clear, can be used downstream by the dashboard tools. But we also have cases where the information marks should produce documents, either from structured data in a raw data vault or from all these semi-structured documents inside your satellites. We produce more documents, different documents. You could combine and merge documents, different JSON messages, merge them into a new document, for example, that kind of stuff. So you could even have a target, a information mart or an interface mart where you produce JSON data. That depends on your business case, your technical use case, essentially, how you want to consume the information you're producing. But JSON is also good for the target, good for the output. So for a sound problem here, I rely on the team to shift that a bit. So that's why I kept going. All right. Yeah. So yeah, keep doing it, but even virtualize in this case. On Snowflake, you can virtualize the extraction of the JSON data. Yeah, works. All right. If you have a question like this, use the link here that will point to a form where you can type in your question, upload some pictures, whatever. sfr.e/db Friday. Also check out scalefree.to/webinars. That's where we find, or where you find, additional webinars at the moment for Warescape and DBT. A monthly webinar where our tool experts speak about the tools essentially and how they tackle several problems or several challenges. And if you can't wait until next Friday for the next Data Friday, check out Data Innovators Exchange. That's a forum-like community where you can ask questions by the minute. And our consultants or experts here at Scalefree, but also at Ignition Data in Australia, they will essentially jump on your questions, essentially, and answer them. There's a couple of questions here popping up. So let me, if you extract some, let me just show it to you. If you extract some attributes from the JSON into a separate column, would you remove that field from the original JSON and store only the result, or store the original JSON? Yes, so what we typically do is when we analyze the JSON, the incoming JSON, extract the fields that we need and leave the rest in JSON structures. We typically have I did both, to be honest, but typically we would remove those fields from the JSON, store them as a relation attribute, and then have some JSON-based attributes for the rest that we didn't analyze in more detail, right? That's the idea, because you will face a GDPR problem otherwise. You have to be able to remove or reduce the personal data, remove the personal data from the customer record, and if it's all in a JSON, that becomes a problem. So if you separate that out of the JSON, it makes it much easier. Well, having said that, I also have cases where we just kept it because there was no personal data in it, for example. So then you could just keep it in a JSON and extract it in side by side with it both, essentially. All right, so that's number one. How to approach JSON that contains lists of objects. Yeah, so the granularity is finer than the top JSON level. Would you unnest before string JSON? Yeah, so sometimes you have database support for arrays. For example, in Postgres, you have an array data type. You could use that one. Or what we often do is we keep the sub-JSON structure, the JSON array, and store that as another JSON inside the satellite. And for example, a standard satellite with a JSON array attribute becomes multi-active, right? So that's an alternative to the multi-active satellite these days. And we see that quite often, actually, where you have a set of phone numbers and store them as a JSON array inside the satellite, inside a standard satellite. One delta only, right? But with the JSON array with all the phone numbers. That's also multi-active data, right? That's what we do a lot. Especially in some cases where you can't trigger, or let's say, I've built some interesting systems where the loading was done via triggers. And in a trigger, you can't do multi-active data that easily, at least not on Postgres derivatives. So it's much easier if you have one delta and then a JSON string with all the phone numbers, essentially, right? So yeah, so the unnesting I do a lot in the JSON functionalities in a database, on a database level in my business logic. Because when I apply my business logic, I'm thinking a lot about granularities, right? So that's I feel very comfortable in dealing with those grain issues, these unnesting issues in my business logic, essentially. That's the basic idea. So that's what I do. But you have all the options, right? So I can't tell you which is the best options, which one is the best option here. That's what my preference is to deal with this in JSON, as long as the performance permits, right? That's the other thing.